On today's episode of Uncommon Sense, a Super Bowl special episode as we talk about G.K. Chesterton and his experience of American football. Stay tuned. Hello viewers and listeners, welcome to another episode of Uncommon Sense. My name is Joe Grabowski, the VP for Evangelization here at the Society of G.K. Chesterton. And coming to you today with a special episode. This is the day after the Super Bowl, but I am recording this, in which my hometown Eagles managed to triumph over the Kansas City Chiefs. Whatever you think about the outcome of that game, though, I thought that we could take this time and have some fun talking about G.K. Chesterton and the game of American football. We'll be back to our regular style episodes next week, but this is just a solo effort on my part. Here in the Super Bowl, in the week of the aftermath of the Super Bowl. And for those who aren't familiar, G.K. Chesterton did get to see a football game when he visited America in the year 1930. We did talk about this once before on the podcast. We talked about it back in October of last year when we discussed Chesterton's Marian poetry. And that's the connection that we have today, that we're going to take a little bit of a deeper dive into this great poem that G.K. Chesterton wrote called The Arena. But first, to set it up, Chesterton was invited to be a guest lecturer at the University of Notre Dame for a period of about 6 weeks in 1930, in the fall of 1930. He was very popular there on campus as a lecturer, kind of a guest celebrity in the English department. And his lectures were well attended and well received, but he also got to do some extracurricular activities while he was here in America. He enjoyed sitting on a porch, quintessential American experience, kind of out in the heartland with the family that he was staying with. He enjoyed sitting on the rocking chair on the porch and, dandling the infant of the household on his knee. He also enjoyed the homebrew experience because this was, of course, during Prohibition, and so the only way to get ale was if you were making it yourself. And so he did get to experience Prohibition and also the scofflaw experience of Prohibition as well. But another great experience that he had while he was here in America during that year of 1930 is that he was invited as a guest of honor on the dais at the dedication of the University of Notre Dame's stadium. So while he was a lecturer there at Notre Dame on October 10th of 1930, Friday evening, they had the official dedication ceremony of the house that Rockne built, the new and now well-storied and famous Notre Dame Stadium. And Chesterton, as I said, was right up on stage during that dedication, and he received a tremendous roar of applause when he went out, and he was actually quite alarmed by it. He thought that the crowd was angry, but they were just very excited to see him there for this event. And then the next morning, Chesterton attended the Notre Dame game against Navy, where the Irish beat Navy quite handily. And he got to experience this football game in the American style. And he was quite impressed by it. It left a lasting impression that when he got back to England, he decided to dedicate to writing, and he did that in the form of a poem. And he sent this poem back to the president of the university, and it was eventually published in the South Bend Tribune in March of the following year, 1931. And the poem is called The Arena. The subtitle is Causa Nostrae Laetitiae, or The Cause of Our Joy, which is one of the titles of Our Lady from the Litany of Loreto, which is an ancient litany prayer. Not quite ancient, but an old litany prayer in the church that cites all these different titles of Our Lady, and you'll see that as a theme in the text of the poem. It's a marvelous poem. If you haven't read it, I do encourage you to take it to your reading and to read it often. It's an easy one to commit to memory if you're so inclined. But I thought we would just go through this poem today and talk a little bit about the richness of it. And this is sort of an exercise in how one can read G.K. Chesterton. Because even if you don't understand any of the allusions, even if you don't understand any of the things that could be cited with footnotes in the poem, nevertheless, you'll get the spirit of it, you'll get the feel of it, you'll be able to appreciate the imagery and the drama that this poem expresses. But if you so choose, you can go further up and deeper in. You can dig down beyond the surface reading of the poem, and you can start to find all of these rich allusions that Chesterton is making with his vast education to classical figures and things like that. And so it's kind of like the peeling of an onion, the layers of an onion, as you read this poem and as you study it. And I think that's kind of a parable for reading Chesterton in general. You know, sometimes I feel that people are intimidated by Chesterton because they think that they need to get all of that marrow out of the bone or all of that pith out of the fruit. And that's a laudable and certainly wonderful thing to do if you are so inclined, if you're of that temperament, if you have the time. But simply reading Chesterton for enjoyment, reading him without dashing to Wikipedia to look up who's this person to whom he is making reference, is a good exercise. Chesterton is enjoyable, and he's not meant to be highfalutin. He's not meant to be above our heads. He's not, some stuffy academic. He was a writer for the populace, for the common man. And so, I would encourage people, however you read Chesterton, just to read him, to make sure that you're consuming some of Chesterton and appreciating his prose, his beautiful imagery, his wonderful insights, his wit, his humor, and the profundity that occasionally peeks through. And you're going to get all of that from just a simple reading of GKC. And that said, as I mentioned, once you dedicate to studying him and going further, you will find that rewarding as well. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. You don't need to be an academic, you don't need to be a scholar to appreciate G.K. Chesterton. However, if you want to put forth more of your effort into Chesterton, you will find that that pays dividends, and that it's certainly a worthwhile task. So, let's go through this poem really quickly. I just will keep this episode short today since it is just me solo, but I want to read the poem first and then just talk a little bit about how it unfolds if you do apply yourself to studying it a little more in depth. So this is the Arena, Causa Nostra Laetitiae. There uprose a golden giant on the gilded house of Nero, even his far-flung flaming shadow and his image swollen large, looking down on the dry whirlpool of the round arena spinning, as a chariot wheel goes spinning, and the chariots at the charge. And the molten monstrous visage saw the pageants, saw the torments, down the golden dust undazzled saw the gladiators go, heard the cry in the closed desert, Te salutant moratori, as the slaves of doom went stumbling, shuddering to the shades below. Lord of life, of lyres and laughter, those about to die salute thee, at thy godlike fancy feeding men with bread and beasts with men. But for us the fates point deathward, in 1,000 thumbs thrust downward, and the dog of hell is roaring through the lions in their den. I have seen where a strange country opened its secret plains about me, one great golden dome stand lonely with its golden image, one seen afar in strange fulfillment through the sunlit Indian summer, that apocalyptic portent that has clothed her with the sun. She, too, looks on the arena, sees the gladiators grapple, she whose names are 7 sorrows and the cause of all our joy, sees the pit that stank with slaughter scoured to make the courts of mourning, for the cheers of jesting kindred and the scampering of a boy. Queen of death and deadly weeping, those about to live salute thee. Youth untroubled, youth untutored, hateless war and harmless mirth, and the new lord's larger largesse, holier bread and happier circus, since the Queen of sevenfold sorrow has brought joy upon the earth. Burns above the broad arena, where the whirling centuries circle, burns the sun clothed on the summit, golden sheeted, golden shod, like a sunburst on the mountains, like the flames upon the forest, of the sunbeams of the sword blades of the gladiators of God. And I saw them shock the whirlwind of the world of dust and dazzle, and thrice they stamped a thunderclap, and thrice the sand wheels whirled, and thrice they cried like thunder on Our Lady of the Victories, the mother of the master of the masterers of the world. Queen of death and life undying, those about to live salute thee, not the crawlers with the cattle, looking deathward with the swine, but the shout upon the mountains of the men that live forever, who are free of all things living but a child, and he was thine. So there you have it. That is G.K. Chesterton's marvelous poem, The Arena. And there's many things that I would want to say about this. First of all, just to look at the poem in basic scansion, right? How would we try to categorize this poem? This is sort of a meta note about it. It's an irregular scheme. It's not any kind of standard stanzaic pattern or system of, iambs and pentameter or anything like that. It is actually a series of trochees and spondees and all kinds of things like that if you wanted to get into breaking down the technical bits and pieces of the poem. But more than that, it's rhythmic. And what I mean by that is if you just listen to kind of the beats. Da ta 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 ta. Ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta. It's that kind of thing. Maybe I'm imagining it. Nobody else, to my knowledge, has pointed this out. But when I hear that, it reminds me of nothing quite so much as the drum beats of a drum corps in, say, a college marching band at a football game. You could imagine Chesterton sitting there in the stadium, the house that Rockne built, and the Notre Dame marching band coming out and, playing their cadence on their drums as they marched onto the field, and that sound kind of sticking with him in his memory in a visceral way, such that when he's sitting there and writing this poem and thinking of this imagery, it kind of just naturally flows out in that pattern. You could take or leave that interpretation. It's of course open to debate. You could look for other exemplars or other forms that maybe Chesterton was kind of imitating here. But for my money, I think that he was sort of channeling the kind of sound of what the stadium was like that day in 1930 when he was in attendance. As I mentioned with the heavily elusive references in this poem, let's go back to the very first stanza. And the imagery that Chesterton is using here is very easy for us maybe to miss. So right in the first two lines, there uprose a golden giant on the gilded house of Nero, even his far-flung flaming shadow, and his image swollen large. Okay. Right in the first three lines here, we have a few references that could be entered into for deeper study. The Golden Giant. This is the Colossus Neroni, or Neronis. This is an enormous statue of the Emperor Nero that was built in bronze. And we know that it's Nero that he's talking about because Nero is mentioned in the next line. Sometime between 64 and 68 AD, this statue was completed, and it was erected in an atrium of the sprawling palace complex that Nero had built at the same time. That house of gold, the Gilded House, or the Domus Aureae, is the name of that palace complex that Nero had built. So this giant, ostentatious palace, it had over 300 rooms, not a single bedroom. It was all simply for, a show of power and for entertaining purposes, for having his giant feasts, not necessarily for any practical use. And an ironic twist, which just makes this reference so beautiful, that litany of Loreto that I mentioned later would take the name House of Gold and turn it into a title of Our Lady, which is kind of interesting. But that probably has some sources in Scripture, but there's sort of a nice irony of the fact that the name given to Nero's house, the House of Gold, eventually comes to apply to Our Lady. Nero, who of course persecuted the Christians, Mary, who is the mother of all Christians. His far-flung flaming shadow, of course, is an allusion to Nero's starting, allegedly, the Great Fire. Whether or not he started the Great Fire of Rome, he certainly used it for his own purposes, blaming it on this new religious sect called Christians that was growing in the empire, and he made it a pretext for crucifixion. Some people speculate that Nero actually did start that fire. He started it for possibly, in part, clearing of area so that he could expand that great palace complex that he was working on. Others have speculated that perhaps it was started in retaliation against Nero because of the vast use of public money and the public works that were part of this building of this great palace complex. So Nero, even in his time, not necessarily a very popular figure. His image, swollen large, is an allusion to just the monstrous ego of Nero, who certainly, as was the case with many of the Caesars, claimed almost a divine status for himself, and put himself on coinage on the opposite side of, I believe it was the god of Pluto on one of the sides of the coins. So you see that Nero is kind of this figure that Chesterton wants us to think about standing above what? The Colosseum. Incidentally, that arena that Chesterton goes on to speak about in the poem, the arena of Nero, is not the Colosseum that we know of. That was built later. However, that Colosseum does have a connection to Nero in the sense that it is because of the location of the statue, the Colossus of Nero, that the Flavian amphitheater that was built by Hadrian, more than a half century later after Nero, it took on the name Colosseum, the popular name Colosseum, because of its proximity to that statue. So you have to kind of imagine this scene Chesterton is painting of this giant statue of Nero overlooking the gladiatorial combats that are taking place there in the Colosseum. Let's see, there's another where in stanza 2, the golden dust undazzled saw the gladiators go, heard the cry in the closed desert. Chesterton here is, again, just showing kind of the strength of his education. The word arena literally means sand. That's what the word arena comes from in Latin. Latin harina is just the word for sand. And the arenas, which was, again, we think of the amphitheaters as the Colosseum and things like that under proper names, but they were all known as arenas. That's because while it was constructed as a building, it had a wooden floor. The floor was then covered like sand, and so it was literally a closed desert that the combatants would go in and fight either animals or one another. The Latin reference, probably the only line in the poem that needs a footnote. It's a good sign of a poem when it doesn't necessarily need footnotes, even if it would benefit from it. Te salutant moratori, is Latin, those about to die salute thee. And this is allegedly a phrase that the gladiators would either say to the emperor. We have no record of this being a regular thing, but it is recorded in one particular staged naval battle that was done for the Emperor Claudius in AD 52, where the slaves stood forth and greeted him, "Hail, Emperor, we about to die, salute thee." It may have been a tradition. It was certainly in some popular cultural sources. It was known to be then a phrase that would be used in any gladiatorial combat. So by looking at a close reading of that first stanza, I think you get the sense of just all of the richness that this poem has to offer, and I would commend it to your study. I'm going to link in the show notes to my notes on this poem. You can go through line by line, stanza by stanza, take a look at my footnotes. I don't claim anything there as definitive in any way. It's not meant to be preclusive of any other kind of reading that might be offered. I'm sure that, like all good poetry, this one is open to a certain amount of interpretation. But I do think that by just appreciating some of the richness of metaphor and allusion that Chesterton is deploying, it might unlock deeper meaning for you. And I want to close this week's episode, this kind of different approach, this different episode, just by saying why. Again, recapitulating. First of all, I think that this is just a good kind of case in point, a good object lesson in how we can read Chesterton. Not must, not need to. It is not certainly a bad way of reading this poem, simply to read it and appreciate the poetry and the musicality of it and to go on your way. You don't need to dig in deeper. And that is the way with all Chesterton writing. No matter how obscure it might seem, just stick with it, and I think that the point will land sufficiently for you in the way that maybe the busy newspaper readers of his day were consuming most of what Chesterton wrote. They didn't, have an Encyclopedia Britannica on hand all the time to be looking up all his references. And so I think that we should make an effort just to enjoy Chesterton on those kinds of terms. But then if you do want to, Chesterton, I find, in even the most seemingly superficial or seemingly quotidian newspaper essay that he wrote, does have this depth of richness just because of his remarkable education, his remarkable powers of retention, his mind, which was so active. Almost every time you turn the page of Chesterton, you can find a rabbit hole to fall into. And if you're so inclined to do that, that also can be a very fun thing to do and another way of enjoying this great writer. So that's point number one that I would make. Point number two, why this exercise and why today? Well, because I'm celebrating the Eagles win in the Super Bowl, but also simply because I think this is a great object lesson in Chesterton's way of viewing the world. We probably tuned in and watched the spectacle of the Super Bowl, and of course, it's a far cry from a college football game in 1930, and with all of the commercialism and all of the advertising and the popular culture references and things, maybe we would do better to kind of, hang it up at this point. Who knows? I'm not going to opine upon that, but what I would say is this ability to see in a football stadium, in the facing off of these two teams in an athletic contest, something that inspired him to reflect upon the gladiators in combat under the Roman Caesars, and then perhaps the Christian martyrs refusing to engage in that blood sport and that combat, but nonetheless being made a spectacle. And now how all of that has been sort of transformed and redeemed, and we could have a game that is, as he says, harmless war, and bloodless war and harmless mirth. This is part of what Christendom bequeaths to us, as part of the change that Christ has wrought, the change that Our Lady's Yes has wrought, and there's something really beautiful in that. And I think that it's just emblematic of the way that Chesterton was able to encounter his culture in almost any way, whether it be, the lights on Broadway, famously, that he saw, and in Times Square in New York, that he said it would be just a wonderful fairyland for anyone who was blessed to not be able to read, because of course then once you can read, that these are shampoo advertisements and things like that. But he was able to see that there's something beautiful about the bright lights and the sparkle of it all. Similar here, I think Chesterton was able to see through the ostensible veneer of mere sport and see a deeper meaning. He was always on the lookout for things that would turn his mind upward to reflection upon the higher things, reflection upon the things of eternity and the things of our Lord. That's a great lesson for us in life. I think that even watching the Super Bowl, if we try hard enough, no matter what we're engaged in, no matter what we're about here below, we can find opportunities to reflect on the more important things, the higher things. And Chesterton's a great model of how to be able to do that. Well, thank you all. Sorry for a little bit of a rambling and unplanned, unscripted episode. This is a little more off the cuff, but do check out, if you're interested, my annotations of the arena, my complete annotations of all of the stanzas, more than what we got through here today, down in the show notes. And be sure to hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, tune into every episode that we release weekly here on Uncommon Sense. And please do share this podcast with a friend, because as we know, Chesterton is always better with friends. Till next week, God bless.